All right, the Club World Cup is almost upon us. FIFA's answer to a question that no one asked. There's going to be a lot made of fatigue and the amount of games played in a schedule that already feels like it's at its breaking point. On top of this, the European clubs will probably meet this with indifference. Certainly their fans will. And the clubs seem interested in it only because FIFA threw a ton of money at the tournament just to make it work. That being said, I think it could still be a surprisingly entertaining tournament because of all the other continents where all the clubs and fans probably will be taking it a lot more seriously than European teams will. I imagine certainly like the Brazilian teams will really want to go at it and genuinely feel like they could win it all, which I'm not sure if that's going to happen just because of how dominant Europe's become in the club sphere. But certainly Brazilian teams are very good, and Brazil is the best league outside of Europe in the world. I don't doubt that at all. So Brazilian teams will probably still do pretty well. And I'm also just interested to see how all these different countries and continents represented, different playing styles, different teams, how they compete against each other. I think that this could be a surprisingly fun tournament just because of the wealth of different playing styles, teams, continents that we're going to see represented in this. And it kind of will expose the general footballing support fan base, especially in Europe, to clubs that they might not know otherwise. Teams like Mamelodi Sundowns or Urawa Red Diamonds, Auckland City FC. This could be a really fun time and something to show off some clubs that don't usually get the spotlight. With that in mind, I'm going to be making a preview every day for each group, starting with Group A, which has Palmeiras of Brazil, Al Ahly of Egypt, Porto of Portugal, and Inter Miami of the United States. Inter Miami, other than LAFC, are probably the most controversial inclusion in this tournament. They got in as the host nation. The host always gets one slot in the Club World Cup, and that doesn't change when it expanded to 32 teams. But the way they qualified is iffy to say the least. They qualified by winning the Supporters Shield in 2024. The issue is that FIFA never actually set out a set qualification method. They just said there will be a host team from the US, but never set out any way that that team could qualify. And so there was always this feeling that they were going to choose Inter Miami and find some way to do that. And when Inter Miami won the Supporters Shield, they basically were given the perfect chance, FIFA, to include this team in the tournament, which I think they always wanted to do. It's kind of controversial again because the Supporters Shield isn't the biggest trophy to American teams. The biggest trophy MLS clubs can win would be the Champions Cup or MLS Cup. The Supporters Shield is secondary to those two. And certainly other teams, specifically the Columbus Crew, probably over the last 4 years have done more to deserve that host spot from the U.S. But the Columbus Crew don't have Messi, so it was always going to be Inter Miami. And from that explanation, you could probably tell I don't like Inter Miami that much. I don't like the kind of special treatment they get from the league. I understand why, and if MLS had Messi in their league and didn't shout it from the rooftops, they'd be making a massive marketing mistake. I think it is good for U.S. soccer to have Messi in the league, even if it is annoying how much MLS goes for him and focuses on him. I also don't like Inter Miami because MLS has been broadly kind of moving away from this sort of retirement league moniker. A lot of clubs have embraced youth more. You could see that with the Galaxy, who to some degree they still have Marco Reus, but they stopped just relying on big stars and actually had to focus on youth development. That finally saw them win MLS Cup again. And players like Miguel Almiron, Alphonso Davies, John Duran all came through MLS. It's becoming a kind of breeding ground for young Latin American talent, which is really exciting. And in the midst of all that, there's a few clubs that refuse to embrace this new era of MLS. And one of those clubs is Inter Miami, who have continued to just sign old players. And what's even more annoying is it worked pretty well last year when they were the best team in the regular season, even if they lost immediately in the playoffs. Atlanta United causing a win for all of U.S. soccer, I gotta say. So I don't like Inter Miami that much. That being said, I am going to be rooting for them in this group because once an American team is in an international competition, I throw all of the rest to the side and I get behind them. Certainly in the Champions Cup against Mexican teams, I still think that I will be rooting for Inter Miami because they're American, and I want to see American teams do well, even if they're one of my least favorite American teams. I don't think they're going to do well, though. I feel like this could be quite embarrassing for Inter Miami because they start off with Al Ahly, and the opening games to the group might be very important tone setters because you've got the two favorites most likely in Porto and Palmeiras going up against each other, and Al Ahly and Inter Miami also playing each other. So it's a chance for those two clubs to kind of get some start that could get them on the right path for the rest of the group. I feel like outside of Europe and South America, Al Ahly are probably amongst like the five or even three best clubs outside of those two continents in the world. Like, Al Ahly is a very good team. They finished third at the 7-team Club World Cup on 4 different occasions. And they're just a very team, one of the best from the Arab world as well. I think that Al Ahly's probably going to beat Inter Miami. I think they have more quality than Inter Miami, even if Inter Miami probably gets more media attention. Inter Miami has a ton of really big names, chief among them Messi, but they are old, and I just think Al Ahly will do more than like they're better. That's all I can really say. They didn't actually win the CAF Champions League this year. They usually do. They're basically Africa's version of Real Madrid. They did win the Egyptian League again, though, for the 45th time. So I think Al Ahly is probably going to do it and could even make it through to the knockout stage. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. However, the two favorites will be Porto and Palmeiras. Porto, of all the European clubs that the other three teams could have been drawn against, they'll probably be pretty happy with Porto because whilst in the past Porto's been very formidable, and certainly at pretty much any other point in the last 20, 30 years, Porto would have been a very scary proposition. I mean, they won the Champions League in 2004. I just don't see them doing much at this time round. They are at one of the worst moments they've been in as a club in a very long time, and it seems like they're very demoralized. They finished third in the Premier League. They crashed out of Europe early. Like, this is just, it's not a great time to be a Porto fan. They were well off the pace. They lost 4-1 to Benfica twice. There's just not a lot of happiness going around Porto right now, and a demoralized and weaker Porto team than usual could be an interesting proposition, and something that Palmeiras and Al Ahly will probably be licking their lips at, the possibility to get a result against them. Palmeiras are the team I actually am going to go out and say will win this group. Though they aren't known for spending big, they did this most recent window in Brazil sign Vitor Roque and Paulinho, who are two of the three most expensive signings in the history of the Brasileiro. So from not spending too big, it seems like they've made two signings specifically with the Club World Cup in mind. They're currently fourth in the Brasileiro, and I assume that Palmeiras, they are probably the ones who are going to take it the most seriously, and Brazil has a very strong league, and this is one of Brazil's best teams. So I'm going to say Palmeiras off just a bit of a shock and win the group. I will go for Porto in second, but I wouldn't be surprised if Al Ahly ended up taking that second spot. Even though I'd like to see Inter Miami do well, I think they're going to finish fourth, and maybe a point at best is what they'll get. I'd love for them to prove me wrong, but I don't think it's going to happen. So that's that. The last thing I'll talk about is attendances, because that could be fairly interesting, because there is a decent-sized support of soccer in the U.S. now. I'll say soccer in relation to the U.S. just because, like, for the sake of making that easy distinction. If all Americans a lot of Americans say soccer, I don't mind saying that for a U.S. video. I should explain. Sorry. Anyways, attendance-wise, I think that this will actually be a pretty good, all 3 games are in NFL stadiums, 3 at MetLife in New Jersey, 2 at Hard Rock Stadium in Florida, and 1 in Atlanta. And Inter Miami never leaves the South. The farthest they have to go outside of Miami is Atlanta, and for that I imagine they're going to get pretty big attendances. Porto, maybe not as big of support as the Premier League clubs are like Bayern, Juventus, Real Madrid, but they've still probably got enough fans in the U.S. that they'll do well with attendances in NFL stadiums. And Palmeiras and Al Ahly, I think, might be able to bank on diaspora populations in the U.S. Certainly Al Ahly, who will be playing in Florida and New York, two of the states with the highest Arab diasporas in the country. I think that that'll go pretty well for them. I would not at all be surprised if they manage to sell out games in New York and Miami with the large Arab populations there. And the same probably goes for Palmeiras, the club of Sao Paulo's Italian community. There's a pretty large Italian diaspora in New York, so I assume that could also go quite well for them. So I think attendances will probably actually pretty well, even with them all being played in NFL stadiums. This is one of the groups that seems more open than a lot of them. So, of all the groups, this is one of the ones I'm more excited about too. I can't wait to get into it. Let's go.